Welcome back to Jones & Company. Thank you for sticking with us. I'm your host, Brian Jones, and today our special guest is the Honorable Gorge A. Smith, former Member of Parliament, former Cabinet Minister, and the first chairman of the Independent Secretariat of the Bahamas in 1973. Thank you so much for sticking with us on this segment and being so engaged. You have such a clear view on where the Bahamas needs to go, right? A lot of us are used to discussing our problems, right? And people love to highlight the problems. I notice you're quite solution-oriented. One of the things I am just reflecting on, one of the comments you made earlier, was the rise and the decline of some of the family islands. And today, especially what we see in Prime Minister Philip Davis's budget for this year and going forward is a real emphasis on family island development, right? To generate a resurgence, a revitalization in those areas. So it'd be interesting to understand what went wrong. Why did some of those islands fail? I know there's different microcosms and different reasons for the failures, but just to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of our past as we now seek to diversify our economy and build up our smaller islands.
I think the economic failures, other than the hurricane that occurred with Grand Bahama, took place because the founders of the port area of Freeport envisioned an industrial city. And the industries which were there, and some of them prospered for a while. And then we started to drift into trying to make Grand Bahama, Freeport area, a tourism place. I remember going there, and I marveled at this massive hotel called King something. I forgot what it later became. But it was nowhere near the water, in the Bahamas. They had this hotel of hundreds of rooms inland. Well, that was because they thought the industries that they would attract would bring sufficient people to keep those hotels going. And then we tried to turn them into resort-oriented hotels, and that just didn't work. The failure, and some of the companies that settled in Grand Bahama were never properly funded to be a success. That was partly the reason why the government at a particular time had to establish a hotel corporation to try to keep a couple of those hotels going. The failure of Elutra went from becoming a producer of chickens, eggs, milk, all kind of industries, agriculturally based industries, occurred when Pan American Airways had to pull out because of the failure of Pan Am, and flights into there, and they had some golf courses there. They all declined because of the fact that the companies that they belonged to failed in their operation. Exuma converted fairly smoothly from an agricultural island to a touristic island because of the natural beauty and where the private-owned land is. I think that we have to recognize what each island is best positioned and its people ready to do. Abaco can do well in farming, extremely well. Abaco is also a natural place for yachters, motor sailors, and single home ownership. And of course, Treasure Key, if it ever revives, as it should, and I think there's some possibility, can become a major marina for boats from the eastern seaboard of the United States, and establish it as a yachting mecca, as a single home ownerships and all that. And then, of course, the prospect for its agriculture and its fisheries. You and I have a dear friend who has a particular interest in putting Cat Island on the map. And if his dreams comes true, that will happen. I believe that Exuma is best positioned with Club Med going back into San Salvador, and the spin-off effect San Salvador will be well. I think that there is some interest being shown in some of the other islands. I don't hear anything specifically about Acklins and Crooked Island, but I know that too will come. Bimini will always do well as long as there are yachters who live in the Miami, Lauderdale area can pop over to Bimini. New Providence, the growth that the realization coming out of the pandemic of what will happen additionally on Paradise Island, Cable Beach, South Ocean with proposed talks about further development there, and smaller little resorts that will pop up in New Providence. New Providence ought to do well. I also know that there has to be the reality that if the Bahamas can produce more of the, produce not necessarily by making them here, but if Bahamians can sell to the resort, the bigger resorts in the Bahamas, 10% more than they already sell, that will put X numbers of millions of dollars into the public treasury. If goods and services, if the hotels could just increase it by 10, 15%, I'll put another 400 million, 500 million in, and imagine that going into the pockets of the cab drivers, the artisans, the shops that sells the various things, and the Bay Street. If Bay Street can, the owners of the property on Bay Street can get together with the government, as is it being encouraged by the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism and Investment. If you could clean up Bay Street, improve the appearance of those buildings on Bay Street, get people who own those abandoned buildings to put them to some use, and make the city of Nassau a living city, where people actually live in it again, where on top of the shops on Bay Street are apartments. And if we could make the city of Nassau living and the port of New Providence a more active port, so that people can be, you can ferry from New Providence to Paradise Island in the evenings to go over there for entertainment, you know, and bring life back to it. We should turn the city of Nassau into the beautiful historic city it to a lesser extent once was. And all it takes is money. Money and determination and leadership. I think that the Prime Minister is trying to focus some of his ministers' attention on getting public-private investment. The port looks like it's improving properly. The Cabinet Office is, I think, under construction, and there's talks about some of the other properties around. I also believe, for the benefit of the people of New Providence, we ought to introduce a vibrant local government system, so that people in Carmichael know that they are living in an area that will one day become a city, the city of Carmichael, and where the communities in the other areas of New Providence, the people living there could have a say in what's happening. There is no reason why these potholes have to become a major concern of the Ministry of Works. Those are local government matters that, and in many cases, some of the Eastern District of New Providence, the Western District, and the Carmichael area, they could probably fund an appreciable amount of the money necessary to do what will be the responsibility of a local government. It is wrong to have something in a country called local government in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and exclude the island where 2/3 of your population live. It was wrong when it was implemented in 1996, and it is wrong now, and it's wrong to be talking about it and don't bring real local government to New Providence and improve the standard of local government in the Family Islands. Our people deserve full participation to the extent that local government should permit.
I agree with you 100%. May I ask, how can we achieve that? What is the process for establishing local government? How can we affect that?
The formula is there. I wrote about it. I have a paper that the government could get access to. Other people did. As far back as 1967, Warren de Varity anticipated it in Grand Bahama. In an amendment to the Hawksbill Creek Agreement in 1960, that the UBP agreed to amend the Hawksbill Agreement. Included in that, they anticipated some of the authority of the Grand Bahama Port Authority would be vested in local government authority. That's in the Hawksbill Creek Amended Agreement.
Okay.
So we don't have to reinvent anything. We could critique that which has been prepared. We could look at the Local Government Act and some of on the islands and determine that Exuma is capable of, by some of the project they want to do, capable of raising some of the money to do those things from not just the Bahamians who live there, but those who call Exuma their second home. And islands where the level of the economy is not very, very active, very promising, very successful. Well, the government, the central government, got to participate, got to contribute most of the money spent in.
But it doesn't have to micromanage.
No, we don't. And I don't know why politicians who talk about these things before they get elected suddenly lose faith in it after they get elected. That has always been part of our problem. We promise to stay in touch. We promise we can straighten this out. And then we promise we can straighten it out. I still can straighten it out to, well, you know, it's more complicated than I thought. But it was never complicated.
We like to complicate things or overcomplicate things. Yes. We like to talk about why things can't be done.
Yeah, it's like that foolish decision that the pandemic hit us. We knew we had to do certain discipline for health purposes. We knew we had to limit some of our movements. We had to do all of that. The world realized that. We knew we needed an entity to manage such periods. So we put in place implementing a thing called the competent authority. Now, generally, most people believe an authority is made up of more than one. But here, we decide a competent authority is going to be one person.
One-man show. One
man. And the last time I heard about the one-man show, it didn't work for him. I remember an election, a prime minister that led his party to defeat talk about he don't need no deputy, and I run in the show. Well, as soon as people had an opportunity, they voted his party out, and he was. And the same thing happened with the pandemic. I figured Mr. Mendes ought to realize when he signed that OBAM deal in Grand Bahama, he should have said, "Oh Lord, I just signed away I just gave my detractors the tools to defeat me in the next election." And then when he made himself the one-man authority, he should have recognized it then, but he didn't. And you know, when you don't recognize your mistake, you will never, ever, ever get the respect of a wise man.
Governance is an inclusive undertaking,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It
yeah.
must be,
Yeah.
right? Especially in a democracy such as this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
But you know, Mr. Jones, I want to say that I think that we have, from slavery to now, we have, Bahamian people have proved they're resilient people.
Yes, we have.
And what they've also proven is don't treat them with disrespect, because you'll pay for that.
Oh, yes.
Also, they want people and governments to acknowledge their contribution. We have to look back at our history and see how the progress we've made has been laced with the courage and the contribution and the sacrifice of Bahamians, from slavery to how we are coming out of this pandemic. And we must remember people. We must remember the men who sacrificed their lives trying to save people when a boat sunk in Nassau Harbor. There's a memorial to them on Clifford, somewhere near Clifford, the Western Esplanade.
Yes.
We must remember there's people who struggle in the labor movement, like Clifford Darling and Randall Fox and Simeon Bowe and Cadwell and Bristol. We must remember the ladies who fought for the right to vote, something that Stafford Sands said they'll never get. We must admire the young people who, and those who belong to political organization who sought to make those organizations more progressive, in tune with what should happen in the Bahamas. And we must remember the men, the 15 of them who went to the United Kingdom in December of 1973 to negotiate with the British our independence, which followed the election when the Bahamian people said, yes, proceed to independence. So the people got to get the primary acknowledgement for the independence that we will, all around this country, we will be telling people, happy independence, happy independence. Well, it happened because the people voted for it in 72, and these 15 individuals negotiated with the British for it. They didn't come back with a perfect constitution. But they came back with a constitution that says it can be changed anytime with the will of the people.
Yes.
So the people remain paramount. But the
Yes.
15 who went over there, I'd like to just say for the benefit of your audience who they were.
Please do.
Those who are deceased: the father of our nation, Lyndon Pindon; our first governor, Bahamian Governor General Milo Butler; that great and talented Acklands man, that warhorse, that Arthur Hanna; that great jurist Paul Adley; public officer Clement Maynard; that educator Carlton Francis; Sir Kendall Isaacson, eminent jurors at the time; Cadwell and Bristol, a great trade unionist; Henry Bowen, who was a great champion of the people in Grand Bahama and ran for Cat Island in the 1956 election; and Norman S. Solomon, who used to import things at a shop called Mademoiselle. He used to get some fine things there for the ladies. And those who are still with us, that scholarly and leading journalists in the Bahamas, Sir Arthur Folkes; Loftus Roca, son of Acklands, very proud of him; Saul Turnquist, great jurist; and from Eleuthera, Reverend the Honorable Philip M. Bettle; and then this humble, insignificant Gorge A. Smith from Exuma. Because when we voted in 72, I used to brag to my colleagues that we will come out there with a higher percentage of yes votes, because a higher percentage of people will vote for the two PLP candidates, Livingston Coakley and George Smith. And we've kept our word. And to them and to all Bahamians, to you and all future Bahamians, We should be very proud that we have this country called the Bahamas. Its
Yes.
beauty is unmatched. Its people are decent in the main. Our problems, our criminality in this country could be brought to check. But the public needs to support our law enforcement agencies. The public needs to be evidently supportive of the courts functioning well. And all spiritual and civic leaders should recognize the problems in the Bahamas we can fix. We have to do it together. We have to do it mindful that this is our land, the only one we got. And what it is, what it can become, or if it's going to fade into insignificant, the burden and the blame for it or the credit for it will rest with us.
Indeed. And obviously, if the Bahamas does not become too susceptible to global warming and rising sea levels, the Bahamas will be here in 50 years, no question about it. What do you see of the Bahamas 50 years from now? What is your vision for the Bahamas 50 years from now?
Well, global warming will affect us in many areas. Andros will be smaller. Parts of the Exuma Keys, low-lying parts, will be underwater. New Providence, the southern part of New Providence, will fall to some of that will fall to the sea. And we will have to look at the land that remain. But what I see, I see the Bahamas being figuratively like a shining city on a hill. We would have dealt with our problems. We would have played our role as we are playing in terms of combating climate change. I think the innovation in terms of your profession and the imagination of the young, brilliant people who are getting involved in the forefront of innovation in terms of technology. And I see our improvement in critiquing what we have historically been good at, our tourism business. I see us looking at those things and deciding how better we could make them work, and how better we could manage our communities, and with proper training, how we could retrain some of the people who are not prone to be too productive. I see a wonderful country, beautiful, manifested by imagination that this painting grew out of, I see an extremely successful country. We can be the Singapore of this hemisphere. And anybody who ever went to Singapore, if they left there not feeling jealous of how they were able to do it, based on what they started with. They took a no-nonsense position on criminal behavior. If you're in the financial world, you have to play by the rules, and there were no excuses.
No gray area.
No gray area. It was because you can do it right, and we can do it right in this country. We've proven that. We have successes that we can point to.
Yes.
We just got to have more successes.
We have to be serious about addressing our real problems,
Our
right?
real
Like
problems.
corruption, for example.
Yes.
Let's talk about that for a moment, right? I mean, we come from a background of pirates, etc. But
gun running, bootlegging,
etc.
drugs,
and that had to be gradually eradicated from our culture and our way of life.
And blaming, shifting the blame.
Yes.
It is not a his problem.
Yes.
It's our problem.
That's right.
And we could do that.
Right. I mean, we have shifted the culture tremendously, right? We've grown economically, politically. We've gone through a lot of the formalities. There's a lot left to be done, but you laid out a solid framework and vision for the country. And I just wonder if you have any final words as a founding father of the nation.
Oh, that's very nice. Well, I think the nation we have is well on the way. We need to hold our parliamentarians to the highest standard the system permits.
Yes.
We cannot make excuses for failure. We can't give lip service to people who are mediocre in their approach.
Mm-hmm.
Every word out of the mouth of those who are in our legislature must mean something. And if we must have enough courage that if we're not up to the task, we ought to move aside, because there are others who could come to the fore.
Mm-hmm.
We must support the government when the government is right. We must criticize the government when it needs criticism, as it does often.
Mm-hmm.
And we must encourage those who are opposed at this time to the government of the day to recognize that they will only have an opportunity to govern if they prove that they are worthy of it. It just can't be, well, you have yours and I have my period. That nonsense got to be over. We cannot build this country into what it could be with this frequent changing of government every couple of years. There has to be consistency in policy, and we must demand the very best from them, the very best. And if they don't produce, hold them to task.
Indeed, indeed. Very well said. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Honorable
sir.
George Smith, for joining us on Jones & Company today on this 49th Independence Day of our lovely nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless the Bahamas.
Yes, and happy independence to you, Bahamas. Thank you for joining us on Jones & Company today, and finish enjoying the 49th anniversary of our independence. Have a good night.